You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Now, familiar tayo sa hard power because yun yung nakikita natin sa West Philippine Sea. But my argument is, yung nangyayari sa West Philippine Sea is the one that's obvious.
China's aggressive incursions in the West Philippine Sea continue to make headlines. But their disinformation campaign, which stretches far beyond our waters, is far less scrutinized and challenged.
If Chinese disinformation continues to prevail and undermine our operations in the West Philippine Sea, we will not be able to achieve the necessary unity to effectively address this issue. It is clear that Beijing's ultimate goal is to ensure that we remain divided and unable to take decisive action against their bullying behavior.
In this episode, we hear from experts, Philippine officials, and journalists who have been trying to change that. I'm Bella Perez Rubio, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News.
I understand that the public knows me in two ways.
That's Commodore J. Tariela, speaking at the forum hosted by the National Defense College of the Philippines.
First, as a Coast Guard spokesperson who exposes the aggressive action of China in the West Philippine Sea. And second, as the alleged source of tainted information that provokes China.
Tariela has become the unofficial face and mouthpiece of what the Marcos administration calls its Transparency Initiative, the strategic exposure of China's incursions in the West Philippine Sea. It might seem commonplace now to see official government accounts posting videos of encounters with Chinese vessels on social media. But less than 2 years ago, such defiance of Beijing would be shocking.
In the previous years, before we started our transparency campaign, there came a point that Filipinos no longer believe the reports of harassment faced by our fishermen from the China Coast Guard, as well as the challenges faced by the Philippine Coast Guard and the armed forces of the Philippines in their resupply operation. This skepticism was not solely due to the success of social media fake news trolls, but also because our own government inadvertently contributed to it before. During that time, the national government propagates a narrative that contradicts these reports.
Journalist Christian Esguerra puts it even more bluntly.
I'm really happy that we're having this conversation today, a more open discussion regarding China's influence operations in the West Philippine Sea, because I think we can agree that it's a more open conversation now because of the change in administration. I can't imagine such open conversations about China's influence operations under the previous administration because of the policy of the then President Rodrigo Duterte.
What many called former President Duterte's policy of subservience left severe damage in its wake, not just on our resources in the West Philippine Sea, but on our information ecosystem as well. Here's Commodore Tariela again.
It becomes incredibly challenging to combat the infrastructure and mechanism of fake news. The impact is far-reaching as these false narratives become ingrained in our own society. As a result, it becomes increasingly difficult now for the truth to prevail and the trust in accurate information diminishes. Since February, when we brought attention to the public the military-grade laser incident, there has been a significant shift in public opinion regarding China's aggressive actions in the West Philippine Sea. A large number of Filipinos now openly condemn these actions. However, it is important to acknowledge that the fake news peddlers and trolls who were previously effective in spreading disinformation that easily have become even more aggressive and relentless. This increase in their activity demonstrates that our efforts to counter their false narratives have been very effective. However, it is essential for the national government to continue winning the battle against this disinformation campaign. Failure to do so could undermine our ongoing efforts in the West Philippine Sea.
So how do these disinformation campaigns actually play out?
It is evident that the Chinese approach to spreading discord through disinformation can happen in two folds. First, they counter factual narratives by presenting their own version of events. They either create a completely new narrative or downplay the severity of incidents. For example, in response to the military-grade laser incident, our good friend, the Chinese ambassador, held a press conference in February claiming that the lasers used by the China Coast Guard were just harmless. You can actually compare them to laser pointers available for purchase online like Shopee, as what he said. They also released their own footage, suggesting that it was the Philippine Coast Guard vessels that intentionally collided with the Chinese maritime militia last October. They also spread fake story denying that the water cannon that they use against the supply boats in August is not also true. Secondly, they attempt to discredit our efforts by attacking the credibility of the messenger. I myself have been a favorite target of their efforts to discredit me as a biased source. Their social media trolls claim that I am a CIA agent and that I am being used by the US government to advance American interests rather than those of the Filipino people. They spread this falsehood in order to undermine the factual information I present, which highlights their bullying and aggressive behavior.
We get into steps we can take to counter China's influence operations after a quick break.
What is our current policy to counter Chinese disinformation campaign in the West Philippine Sea? According to the National Security Advisor, Secretary Eduardo Año, when he was asked the same question by the media when we were in Pag-asa Island, his short response was, "We'll just tell the truth."
Again, that's Commodore J. Tariela.
Another crucial aspect of our success lies in embracing and involving the press. As a democratic country that strongly upholds freedom of the press, we recognize that the Chinese could easily dismiss our narrative if they would claim that the photos and videos from the Philippine Coast Guard were merely edited or manipulated. To counter such arguments, we have made the strategic decision to embed media personalities and journalists within our operations. Through this, we leverage the power of independent journalists who enjoy their freedom to report responsibly. They cannot be criticized as mere mouthpieces of the national government as they maintain their journalistic integrity and autonomy.
There are also calls for Congress to pass laws that would help fight disinformation from China. Here's retired Rear Admiral Romel Ong.
We need to propose a Foreign Interference Act, a Foreign Agent Registration Act, and the amendment to our anti-espionage law. Foreign interference is to prevent a foreign power from funding our local political parties and influencing those political parties to promote foreign interests. A Foreign Agent Registration Act is simply this. Yung think tank sa media natin na spouting Chinese propaganda, under this construct, they just need to register as a foreign agent. That means kahit binayaran sila ng China, we will allow that. But they must be transparent and state, okay, I'm a foreign agent of China.
Ong, a senior research fellow at the Ateneo School of Government, also recommended the establishment of a separate body to review foreign investment and ensure that our existing laws are being properly implemented. Journalist Christian Esguerra mentioned some of the more known approaches to fighting disinformation, such as holding social media platforms accountable for its spread. But governments, including ours, have struggled to do so. But that doesn't mean we're out of options.
The next approach that we often talk about in terms of dealing with disinformation is civic education, which I think should be the bedrock of all efforts to combat disinformation. We often hear the so-called Finland model, wherein as early as kindergarten, people or children are being taught how to think critically, and then that investment in critical thinking would reap rewards or benefits or fruits later in their lives. But that is a very long game.
Esguerra also cautioned against laws seeking to penalize the spread of disinformation, calling the bills currently filed in Congress very simplistic and open to weaponization. But he did call on the media to be more thoughtful about its coverage of the West Philippine Sea.
So alam naman natin kung sino yung nagpapakalat ng pro-Chinese propaganda. And I'm not just talking about so-called analysts or mga pseudo-analysts, yung mga fly-by-night think tanks. Hindi lang yung mga fake social media accounts. I'm also talking about politicians. No, unfortunately, meron tayong mga Manchurian candidates and Manchurian politicians here in the Philippines. You have to accept that fact. Now, Gagamitin ba natin yung platform natin as media organizations to give them opportunities to amplify their lies? I don't think so. And unfortunately, I see many of those opportunities being given by mainstream news organizations, hindi lang sa mga social media platforms. And it really is sickening.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. Pidoy Blanco edited this episode. Our executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior news editor is Veronica Uy. This episode was produced with the support of Report for the World. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend or two, and thanks for listening.